Barbara Stanwyck and Robert Taylor were two of the biggest stars in Hollywood's golden age, and they were also a power couple for a significant time. They married near the end of the 1930s, and the marriage lasted for over a decade, before coming to an end towards the beginning of the 50s. Despite rumors the two had only married each other to cover up their respective sexualities, they remained friends until Robert's death, and some say Barbara never truly got over the dissolution of their union. Join Facts First as we explore the affair that destroyed Barbara Stanwyck's marriage and made her rich. Barbara and Robert were a Hollywood power couple. Towards the end of her life, Barbara Stanwyck still seems to have been holding on to some negative feelings left over from the dissolution of her second marriage. Barbara was married 2 times, and the more well-known of her 2 husbands is Robert Taylor. Robert was a burgeoning star at the time he met Barbara, while Barbara was already one of the biggest stars in Hollywood. The two entered into a celebrity relationship that saw them plastered all over the tabloids of the time. Despite the fact Barbara seems to have been hung up on Robert for decades after their divorce, there still remains much about the pair's relationship that's mysterious. Stanwyck was one of the most popular actresses of Hollywood's golden age, having appeared in films like Double Indemnity and The Lady Eve. The star had a difficult childhood and suffered through an abusive marriage before attaining her celebrity status. Meeting Robert Taylor helped show Barbara the light after having dealt with so much hardship, and the actress grew to cling on to the actor over the course of their relationship. While Barbara had been the younger of the 2 parties in her first marriage, Robert was slightly her junior. He was also less experienced, and it's been said Barbara helped mentor him early on. Barbara's first husband had been jealous of his wife's rising celebrity status during their marriage, while Robert was grateful to have someone to guide him. Barbara and Robert met during the mid-1930s and were married by the end of the decade. One of the things they bonded most over was their love of horses. Barbara had established a horse breeding farm in 1937, which inspired Robert to purchase his own horse ranch nearby. Their ranches were located in San Fernando Valley, and the two started spending more time together after becoming neighbors. It's unsure whether Barbara and Robert were romantically involved at this time or just friends. In fact, according to some, it's unsure if Barbara and Robert were even romantically involved while married. Barbara and Robert were forced into marriage. One thing is for certain, and that is Barbara and Robert were spending an increased amount of time together by the end of the 30s. Given that the two were a man and woman of similar age, their time spent together would have insinuated romance even if their friendship had been completely innocent. The 1930s were a different time, and Hollywood had no room for unmarried couples. When people began to believe the two were romantically involved, the studio pressured them to get married as a means to save face. They got married in 1939 simply because the studio demanded it. The pair had been spending too much time together, and the studio was sick of the public insinuating they were involved in a romance without being properly married. Robert claimed he was unsure about whether he wanted to spend the rest of his life with Barbara. But by all accounts, Barbara was happy, though this happiness wouldn't last. Before we tell you more about their marriage, be sure to give this video a like and subscribe to Facts First if you haven't already. Barbara and Robert didn't spend much time together. Following Barbara Stanwyck and Robert Taylor entering into their decidedly forced marriage in 1939, a great many things ended up coming between the two stars in the years that followed. One of the first things that got in the way was World War II. Like many stars from around that time, Robert decided to put his career on hold and volunteer himself to help out with the war effort. He joined the U.S. Navy and was considered too old to serve overseas at 32. Instead, he was tasked with being a flight instructor, which was a position he filled for 3 years. During that time, the star wasn't afforded much of an opportunity to see his wife. Barbara was home and was incredibly busy with her acting career. As a result, the two stars spent several of the earliest years of their marriage essentially separated. The few moments they did have to spend together were spoiled by their celebrity duties, as cameras followed the pair wherever they went. It seems much of Barbara and Robert's marriage consisted of them putting on a show, whether for the public or for the studio. Another major thing that came between Barbara and her second husband was Lana Turner. Robert Taylor had starred alongside Turner in the 1941 noir Johnny Eager. Apparently, Robert quickly became infatuated with his female co-star, despite the fact that he had recently tied the knot with Barbara Stanwyck. Robert claimed he was so obsessed with Lana Turner, he needed to get his hands on her, even if their romance could only last for a single night. He ended up getting his wish, and he and Lana started up an extramarital affair. Barbara confronted Robert about an affair. Around a decade later, Robert Taylor was working on the set of the film Quo Vadis when he became similarly infatuated with one of his female co-stars. The film was being shot in Rome, though this didn't stop Barbara from hearing about the affair. Once Barbara realized her husband was cheating, she flew to Rome to confront him. Of course, it's not for nothing that the two ended up divorcing within the year. Despite the way it looked, Barbara claimed she was less jealous about her husband's affair and more perturbed by what the tabloids would make of it. However, other stories suggest she may have been a bit more broken up about it. There was even a story that Barbara had attempted suicide after Robert passed along the news that he was seeking a divorce, though Barbara dispelled these rumors. It seems the story came about as a result of Barbara accidentally sticking her hand through a window and requiring hospitalization for her cuts. Upon their divorce, a judge awarded Barbara both the pair's Hollywood home and 15% of Robert's earnings. The earnings stipulations came with the caveat that Barbara was only entitled to this fraction of Robert's earnings until she remarried. Given that she never did, she ended up getting quite a bit of money from Robert after the divorce. Sources vary on just how close Barbara and Robert remained after the divorce. Some say they stayed friends, while some have even gone so far as to suggest they stayed lovers until Robert got remarried in 1954. Regardless, it doesn't seem like there were all that many bad feelings between the two. They even starred in the 1964 film The Night Walker together, only years before Robert's death. Barbara and Robert were friends in the end. Robert ended up marrying a German actress named Ursula Theis, and he stayed with her until his 1969 death. Ursula apparently tried to keep Barbara out of their lives for the most part, but relented when it became apparent Robert didn't have much time left. As Robert was laying on his deathbed, Ursula reportedly reached out to Barbara so she could come and say goodbye. Barbara could subsequently be found weeping at his funeral. Barbara spoke fondly about her second and final husband up until her own death in 1990. But many people continue to question what the true nature was of her and Robert's relationship. There are many who suggest the two were never truly romantic partners and only got together as a means to hide their respective sexualities from the public. Many believe that both Barbara and Robert were predominantly interested in members of the same sex. Some have even suggested they only lived together for a couple of months. Even if they weren't romantic partners, they were undoubtedly good friends. During the years of their marriage, Barbara and Robert were memorably afforded the opportunity to place their hands and feet into wet cement on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. After Robert's death, Barbara's prints cracked, and the actress was asked if she wanted to replace them. Since Robert was no longer around to do the deed alongside her, she let the cracks stay. Now it's time to hear from you. What's your favorite memory of Barbara Stanwyck and Robert Taylor? Let us know in the comments section below. And before you go, make sure you give this video a like and subscribe to Factsverse if you haven't already. Click the bell icon to stay updated on all our latest content.